the 7th. Where we left off. So we are in the middle of a coup, and with Absolom trying to take over as king. I wanted to start, and I forgot my glasses. So
can I say something real quick?
yes.
Yeah, you're going to read that. Let you find your glasses, but
I
don't know if the study of David is just about run its course. I've noticed that on the YouTube recordings that they're not getting a lot of play, and we've probably, maybe we've overtaxed it. But this section coming up, there's not a lot of real strong God lessons in it. What we're seeing is the humanity. David's been king for, I think, 30 years. And over that time, you make friends, you make enemies. And as this thing begins to play itself out, we see some of these people as more than just sort of two-dimensional cardboard cutouts. We see a lot of depth. There's history here, but there's, it's important, I always think, to remember that these people are also humans. They have real lives and not just these little flat stories. And some of the things we see in these chapters, I really love. I love seeing like I say, I love seeing the humanity of it. So, hopefully it's been kind of, I don't know, ugly. It's been harsh for a couple of weeks, but there's some stories in here of friendship, of, old alliances come into play. I almost dream of having friends like that. Last time we met, the guy that's been with David since he was, on the run, and David tells him, look, you need to stay here, serve the new king. I don't want to put you in danger. And the guy says, sort of like Ruth, if you remember, he says, wherever you go, I'm going to go, in life or in death. And I love some of these stories, even though they're not, you won't hear sermons about them. They're not God lessons, but they're a big part of the history.
So like I said, we're in the middle of this coup, and we did the study on Psalms, and I wanted to start today by reading Psalm 3. Now, remember, David had, he had been at war with Saul or running from Saul for years, not at war with him, but running from Saul, Saul chasing him down. This is, as Scott said, 30 years later, and now he has just fled Jerusalem in bare feet, and he is being hunted down by his son. And if you read Psalm 3, it says that a Psalm of David when he fled from his son Absolom. And now that we know the story, to me, it just has so much more meaning than just reading Psalm 3 before. O Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying to me, God will not deliver him. But you are a shield around me, O Lord. You bestow glory on me and lift up my head. Oh, the Lord, I cry out loud. To the Lord, I cry out loud, and he answers me from his holy hill. I lie down and sleep. I wake again because the Lord sustains me. I will not fear the tens of thousands driven up against me on every side. Arise, O Lord, deliver me, O my God. Strike all my enemies in the jaw. Break the teeth of the wicked. From the Lord comes deliverance. May your blessing be on your people. Anyhow, I just think as we study today, you will hear this. You'll hear what's going on that made him write this psalm, or that resulted in him. So we left off on 2 Samuel 15, verse 30. And you get to read, Scott, because I didn't bring my glasses.
All right. So starting at verse 30, I had a request that we announce these passages more efficiently. So 2 Samuel 15, verse 30. And David has just left Jerusalem, by the way. He's headed out with all of these people. And he's at the Mount of Olives. It says, David continued up the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went up. His head was covered, and he was walking barefoot. And all the people with him covered up their heads and went up, weeping as they went. Now someone told David, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. So David pleaded, O Lord, please turn the counsel of Ahithophel to foolishness. When David came to the summit where he used to worship God, Hushai the Archite was there to meet him with his robe torn and dust on his head. David said to him, if you go on with me, you'll be a burden to me. But you can thwart the counsel of Ahithophel for me if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, my king. In the past, I was your father's servant, but now I will be your servant. Will not Zadok and Abiathar the priests be there with you? Report to them everything you hear from the king's palace. Indeed, their two sons, Ahimaaz the son of Zadok and Jonathan son of Abiathar, are there with them. Send them to me with everything you hear. David's friend Hushai arrived in Jerusalem just as Absalom was entering the city.
This is like a really good mystery movie.
A movie, yes, it is. David's heading up the Mount of Olives. They're heading out. The Mount of Olives obviously is just there nearby. And it says, one thing I'll mention, it says that he had his head covered and he had bare feet. And Mary said yesterday, did he just leave in a hurry and forget his shoes? No, this is the sign of him humbling himself. It's the mourning he's in. He's not, as king, he's not too proud to humble himself and go barefoot. There's a lot more to be said, but it's a good side note. He didn't just forget his shoes.
I bet other people thought that too, though.
It's possible. I bet someone did. So, and it says someone told David, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. You don't know this yet, but Ahithophel is one of David's chief counselors. He's a guy that David goes to for advice. And this guy it says later that getting counsel from Ahithophel is like getting the very word of God. It means that his advice is always very sound. And Ahithophel has switched sides and is now with Absalom. And David knows that's bad news for him. Ahithophel will give Absalom good counsel. And so he says to God, please turn his counsel into foolishness. And this is one thing you should notice. David comes to the summit. That's the summit of the Mount of Olives, where he used to worship God. And Hushai the Archite was there and to meet with him. Hushai is another advisor, and he is probably the one guy who could actually counter this advice from Ahithophel. In other words, this to me is answered prayer. He says, he finds out that this guy is giving Absalom advice. And he says, oh, that's trouble for me. He says, God, please bring this man's advice to foolishness. And there at the summit is Hushai, who's another one of these trusted advisors. And David, that's the guy who's going to do what David just asked for. He's going to sort of scramble. He's gonna thwart the counsel of Ahithophel. And so he comes to this guy, and he's old. He's an old man now, and he says, look, if you come with me, you're going to slow me down. But you can help if you'll go down into the city. And when Absalom gets there, tell him you're his servant, and then you can give contrary counsel to what Ahithophel has given him. It's sort of an amazing little thing. He asked for help, and he gets to the peak of the Mount of Olives, and there's his help waiting for him.
These two counselors.
Hold on a second. We're trying something new here. See if you can hear.
These two counselors are not priests, are they?
No, they're definitely not priests. So when it says it's like the word of God, it doesn't really mean it. What it means is his counsel is just really dependable. But period. It's a figure of speech. So one thing that this counselor that has gone over to Absalom, Ahithophel, he lives, all of a sudden I've drawn a blank. He's from Judah though. And if you remember, David has moved the capital out of Judah over to Jerusalem. And I think they're probably still a little raw about it. They've been their own country for so long. And so for this guy to desert David seems like kind of a strange thing, but I think he's tired of not being at the center anymore. He would much rather have, and so Absalom has gone to Judah and had them declare him king in Judah. So he switches alliances.
So then we're going on to 17, and what you'll find here and why like we never hear these in sermons in churches is because the story goes back and forth. It's like a good novel.
It is.
So now we go back to David, a side story that, do you want to read the side story? Go ahead.
Can I just tell it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the first thing is, if you remember, David had sworn to be loyal to Jonathan's, any of his descendants. And there was this one descendant who was lame, and David went and found him and gave him all of Saul's hereditary lands and brought him to Jerusalem and said, "You'll eat at my table." That's Mephibosheth. You want me to read it now?
Yeah.
So we're now in 2 Samuel 16, starting at verse 1. When David had gone a little beyond the summit, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, was there to meet him. He had a pair of saddled donkeys loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, 100 summer fruits, and a skin of wine. "Why do you have these?" asked the king. Ziba replied, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride. The bread and summer fruit are for the young men to eat. The wine is to refresh those who became exhausted in the wilderness." And he says, "Where is your master's grandson?" That's the crippled Mephibosheth. Where's your master's grandson? And Ziba answered, "Indeed, he's staying in Jerusalem, for he has said, 'Today the house of Israel will restore to me the kingdom of my grandfather.'" So Mephibosheth says, "Oh, this is great. I should have been king. I'm a descendant of Saul. And this is the day, now that David's leaving, I get to take my hereditary place." So the king said to Ziba, "All that belongs to Mephibosheth is now yours." So these servants had been set to take care of the land for Mephibosheth. And David said, "This guy wants to be a traitor. All the land that belonged to him is now yours." "I humbly bow before you," said Ziba. "May I find favor in your eyes, my lord the king."
And a lot of these things come back later. So we will run into how do you say his name?
Mephibosheth.
Later. But anyhow, at this point, he's declared a traitor, and David gives his servant his land.
I wish I could say I hadn't seen similar things play out. I mean, you think about this young man when he was much younger, crippled, living in exile. And as a descendant of Saul, most people would have had him killed. And David does all of this for him. David restores the land. He gives him servants that will work the land, and he lets him live in the palace. And this guy, at the first opportunity, says, "Now that David's leaving, this is the day I'm going to get my hereditary place as king." He had no chance at being king before or after, but he turns on David in a heartbeat when he thinks he can get more power and riches for himself. So this, and the other thing you remember is, here's David, they're escaping, they're heading up the Mount of Olives. Part way up, he finds out that one of his greatest friends and advisors has turned against him. At the top, he meets this other advisor that's going to help him. On the way down, he meets the servant of Mephibosheth. It's like a movie. It's just all these characters from his past. Now they hear he's in trouble, and they're showing up to help.
Now there's another side story about the Shammai.
Yeah, here comes, as David approached Bahurim, a man from the family of the house of Saul was just coming out. His name was Shimei, the son of Gera. As he approached, he kept yelling out curses. He threw stones at David and at all the servants of the king. So he's up on a ridge, they're down below. All the servants of the king, though the troops and all the mighty men were on David's right and left. And as he yelled curses, Shimei said, get out, you worthless man of bloodshed. The Lord has paid you back for all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. And the Lord has delivered the kingdom into the hand of your son Absolom. See, you've come to ruin because you're a man of bloodshed. Then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and cut off his head." But the king replied, "What have I to do with you, O sons of Zeruiah? If he curses me because the Lord told him, curse David, who can ask, why did you do this?" Then David said to Abishai and to all his servants, "Behold, my own son, my own flesh and blood seeks my life. How much more then this Benjamite? Leave him alone and let him curse me, for the Lord has told him so. Perhaps the Lord will see my affliction and repay me with good for the cursing I received today." Then David and his men proceeded along the road as Shimei went along the ridge of the hill opposite him. As Shimei went, he yelled curses, threw stones, and flung dust at David. Finally, the king and all the people with him arrived exhausted, and there he refreshed himself.
So first of all, remind people who Abishai is.
Abishai,
Abishai.
yeah, there were these three sons of Zeruiah. That's they're nephews of David.
One's Joab.
And one's Joab, who's been his warlord for all this time. And he's the one that tricked Abner. Remember, he told him at the gate of the city, he says, "Come in, I want to talk to you." And the guy comes up to talk and he stabbed him to death. These are wild men, but they're tough. I mean, they're very, very tough. And then the other one is Abishai. That's the one of them got killed. That's why Joab killed Abner. And these guys are uncontrollable. And so this guy comes along, and remember, he's cursing David because he's from the Saul camp. David took over from Saul, and they're still bitter about it. There's still this is how these intrigues go. And he says, "You're a man of bloodshed. You killed Saul. You're responsible for his death and his descendants' death. And now you're getting what you got coming." And here's Abishai, one of these three brothers, the three wild men. And he says, "How does he dare curse the king? Let me go cut his head off." And David is still, he says, "What am I going to do with you guys, you sons of Zeruiah? No, you're not going to cut his head off. No." And he says, "The fact is, I have it coming. Let the guy curse me." He said, God may have sent him and give him this message. And he says, maybe God will see that I'm merciful and have mercy on me. But no, don't go cut his head off. And again, it's just this portrait in these people that David has been running with for all these years.
And then we now.
Hold on, is he?
Is this an indication of where David's heart is? He's trying to be merciful. He said, "I think I have it coming." In fact, I know, because I'm not allowed to build that temple. I am a man of bloodshed. I tried to do the best I could. Now they're turning back on me, forgetting that I am the anointed one. They want to play the political game, the earthly games, the throne, the conspiracy.
Yeah.
They want to kill me, and they forget. But if God told them to curse me, who am I?
That's pretty much. First of all, I'll look for head shakes. Could you understand, Gene? Is the sound better than it used to be?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hooray. All right, that's good news. Now, hopefully we can have more participation when you can all come back. I'm looking forward to that. But you're absolutely right. And you remember David left Jerusalem because Absalom's coming. And he says, Absalom will put the whole city to the sword. He's saying, as long as I'm here. So David's looking out for the best thing for the country and for the people. Absalom is looking for power. And you're right. He gets to this. This is an indication of David's heart. Some people would be so infuriated at this nobody up here hurling curses, and he would let Abishai cut his head off. But David, David is, even though he's been a man of bloodshed, David's heart, and you remember he's got two sons. One of them is a man of peace, and the other one is my father is peace. I think David has always wanted peace, but it wasn't his place in this world. It just wasn't. But he tells them, leave the guy alone. I got it. I'm sure I have it coming. And maybe God will have mercy on me the same way I'm having mercy on this man.
now we go back, and this is so now we go back to Ahithophel and Hushai. So we had talked about them earlier, that David had sort of set up Hushai, told Hushai to go back to Jerusalem and become the king's advisor. And so we go back to that scene again. Like I said, it goes back and forth.
If you've ever read a Tom Clancy novel, he goes from one thing to another. He'll spend a few days with these people, and then he'll go back to those same few days with some other people. So you get this story in real time, but it sort of bounces back and forth. That's the way this story is written. So we're at 2 Samuel 16, and we start at verse 15. Jackie, I did that for you, by the way.
Yeah.
All right. So then Absalom and all the men of Israel came to Jerusalem. And Ahithophel, that's that counselor, Ahithophel was with him. And David's friend Hushai the Archite went to Absalom and said to him, "Long live the king, long live the king." And Absalom's angry at that because he knows this has been a friend of David's, and he's skeptical. And he says, "Is this the loyalty you show your friend?" Absalom replied, "Why did you not go with your friend?" Now, I think it's kind of funny that he doesn't mind Ahithophel being with him, but he's gonna get on Hushai for not going with David. But he says, "Why did you not go with your friend?" "Not at all," Hushai answered. "For the one chosen by the Lord, by the people, and by all the men of Israel, his I will be, and with him I will remain. Furthermore, whom should I serve if not his son? As I served in your father's presence, so also I will serve in yours." And we'll go back on that. Those are carefully chosen words. Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, "Give me counsel. What should we do?" And Ahithophel replied, "Sleep with your father's concubines, whom he has left to keep the palace. When all Israel hears that you have become a stench to your father, then the hands of all who are with you will be strengthened." They pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and that's the roof of the palace. And he slept with his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Now, in those days, the advice of Ahithophel was like the consultation of the word of God. Such was the regard that both David and Absalom had for Ahithophel's advice.
So we've got the palace here. Remember when David was leaving Jerusalem and fleeing from his son, he left 10 concubines to take care of the palace. So these 10 concubines, and remember at this time, concubines were a step lower than a wife, but there was still
a second order wife. Yeah.
A second order wife. And we can get it anyhow, that's what it was. So he left 10 concubines to take care of the palace. And Absalom has come to the palace, and the first advice that Ahithophel has given him is to set up a tent on the roof. This is the same roof where David looked at Bathsheba. And so, I mean, the irony of, how this all comes back. And remember Nathan the prophet, when he told David, you have done wrong in the sight in God's eyes, Nathan says that what's going to happen to you is
your house will never be free from the sword, and
that someone will sleep with your women the sight of all of Israel.
In the sight of all Israel. And here it is happening. And I'm not even going to get into how creepy it is, this practice. But Ahithophel is this counselor. And after he talks to the other Hushai, he turns to Ahithophel and he says, "Well, you're the counselor. Give me some counsel. What do I do?" And he tells him because this idea of taking the leader, the king's concubines, it's saying, I now possess all that he used to possess. It is a sign of dominance. And creepy as it is, that was the thing. It was just, it's not done unless you want to start a war, and the war's already started. And so Ahithophel tells him, if you do this, all the people who follow you will know that there's no turning back. David's not going to forgive this. And that's what they believe, is that this is a thing that is unforgivable. So now the die is cast. If you do this, we've set things in motion, and they'll be afraid. They won't leave you to try and go serve David, because they will believe that David won't take them. He'll have them killed for being a part of this. So what his advice is, we're going to do something that means that puts in place there's no turning back. And it says the hands of all who serve you will be strengthened, meaning they're going to now be desperate. They have to defeat David because there's no turning back. And he does this thing. And again, I don't even want to think about the actual practicalities of it. But that's all of that section. We'll move to the next section. He does this.
So, and remember, as we always say, we're on 2 Samuel 17 now. Chapters aren't chapters. And so this is still the same scene, if you will.
It is.
You've got Absalom asking Ahithophel for advice, and he's continuing with his advice.
And as repugnant as his advice is, it's very practical.
If you go back to the last line in 23, I think there are echoes he's setting up of what's coming on the advice of Ahithophel.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and actually it says that his counsel was like, it was so good, you could count on it almost like the word of God. It doesn't mean it literally, but it's a figure of speech, but just the same. Ahithophel's counsel was good. I mean, it works in practical terms. What this does is it aligns all these people with it. His advice is good. And you're right. That last line is to set that up and to say what's about to come. And we'll do that. We'll move to 17. This is 2 Samuel 17, and we begin with verse 1. Furthermore, Ahithophel, that's that prize counselor, Ahithophel says to Absalom, let me choose 12,000 men and set out tonight in pursuit of David. I will attack him while he's weak and weary. I will throw him into a panic, and all the people with him will flee. I will strike down only the king and bring all the people back to you as a bride returning to her husband. You seek the life of only one man. Then all the people will be at peace. This proposal seemed good to Absalom and all the elders of Israel. And that's what you were saying. And actually, if you think about it, it's really good counsel.
So when they fled, when David and his people fled, he went about 20 miles in a day and in relatively hard terrain. So he was exhausted.
At that time, 20 miles would be a good day's travel with all those people. But what Ahithophel is saying is, let me take a big force. They had to leave in a hurry. They're going to be weary. Let me write them down, and we'll just focus on David. We're going to do a targeted strike, because once we kill David, everybody else will say, okay, it's over, and they'll come back to you. And what this does is it doesn't deprive Israel of all these fighters, of all of these workers, all these, people. And it's a good plan. I mean, it sounds mean, but in practical terms, it's a really good plan. And
does that line also indicate that Ahithophel was a commander of sorts? Is that more than just a counselor? I will attack, it says.
Well, he's going to lead. He says, let me take 12,000. You can turn it back up. He says, let me take 12,000 men. Which, really is an awful lot for this, but let me take a big force, big enough to ride down David. And I'm going to, and so whether he leads them or not, I don't see any evidence that he's been a commander, but I don't see any evidence that he's not, but it's his plan. And he's saying, I know what to do. And this is what should be done. And in verse 4, this is 2 Samuel 17, verse 4. This proposal seemed good to Absalom and all the elders of Israel. Then Absalom said, summon Hushai the Archite as well, and let's hear what he has to say. And this is a sign of weakness on Absalom's part. He's afraid of making a mistake. A really solid leader would have heard that advice, and knowing who Ahithophel is, he would have said, yep, go do it. But Absalom is not a leader. And he says, well, let me get a second opinion on this. I got this other guy. Let's see what he says. And here comes Hushai. It says, so Hushai came to Absalom, who told him, Ahithophel has spoken this proposal. Should we carry it out? If not, what do you say? Hushai replied, at this time, the advice of Ahithophel is not sound. He continued, you know your father and his men. They're mighty men, and as fierce as a wild bear robbed of her cubs. So you see him playing on Absalom's fear. You see him say, you know your dad. I mean, you know he has a reputation. You know what a fierce fighter him and his men are. And he says, moreover, your father is a man of war who will not spend the night with the troops. Surely now he's hiding in a cave or some other location. And so everything, he's taken Ahithophel's counsel apart. He says Ahithophel wants to go right down and just focus on David. He says, you know, your father is too cagey for that. He lived out in the wilderness. He's not going to stay with all the people. He'll be hidden away someplace. So this plan of this targeted strike, it's not going to work. And he says, if some of your troops fall first, whoever hears of it will say, there's been a slaughter among the troops who follow Absalom. Then even those valiant soldier with the heart of a lion will melt with fear, because all Israel knows that your father is a mighty man who has valiant men with him. So again, he's playing on his fear, and he knows that Absalom doesn't want to look stupid. And so he says, you know, David won't be with them. And if your people ride down on David's troops and they win the first battle, your support's just going to melt away. You can't take a chance on that. So he's shot down everything Ahithophel said. He says, instead, I advise that all Israel from Dan to Beersheba, a multitude like the sand of the seashore, be gathered to you, and that you yourself lead them into battle. Then we will attack David wherever we find him, and we will descend on him like dew on the ground. And all the men with him, not even one will remain. If he retreats into a city, all Israel will bring ropes to that city, and we will drag it down to the valley until not even a pebble may be found. Then Absalom and all the men of Israel said, well, the advice of Hushai the Archite is better than that of Ahithophel, for the Lord had purposed to thwart the good counsel of Ahithophel in order to bring disaster to Absalom. And that's what we said, that David asked for help. And the next person he comes to is this other counselor. And you, like I said, you see him play on Absalom's fear. He's only been king for a few days.
And then on his ego.
And then his ego. And he says, instead of doing this now, bring everybody, just get an army that's the whole country, because everyone wants to follow you. And we'll fall on David like the dew on the ground. We'll just pounce on him. And if he retreats into a city, we'll bring ropes and we'll pull the walls of the city down. And Absalom, you can just almost see him getting his ego stoked. The idea of having an army so big that it's just going to pull the walls of a city down. This guy plays on it first his fear and then his ego.
But why is this not good advice?
Huh?
Why is this not good advice?
Okay, so Ahithophel's advice was absolutely the right thing to do if you want to win. David, and I said this the last time we met, David is still David. And David, when it comes to battle, is unequaled in that time. He wins. And what Hushai is really doing is buying David time. He knows that if Absalom listens to Ahithophel, and if they ride down on him now while they're stretched out in the wilderness and tired, David can lose. But if Ahithophel gives him time to retreat, gather people, fight in a place of his own choosing, David's going to be really hard to beat. That's just David. And so it's bad. What Hushai is saying is bad advice because it gives David time to regroup. David's that good. David is still David. And that's exactly what he's trying to do, is to buy him time.
The other thing is Hushai's speech, if you reread it and you see the examples he gives, I mean, it's a
A bear with her cubs.
Yeah.
You know, your father's mighty men are going to be enraged like a bear with her cubs. He paints this picture of fear, and then he substitutes something in its place. You're going to get an army together that's so big, it doesn't matter. We're just going to ride over David like the dew on the ground. It's masterful. It's a great.
It almost sounds like Shakespeare.
It does almost sound like Shakespeare. I think that it pays not to avoid the very last line. For the Lord had purposed to thwart the good counsel of Ahithophel in order to bring disaster on Absalom. I mean, we're told, you know, this is God at work.
We were talking a little bit earlier at the beginning. This is how we go from the military, earthly, humanity, family struggles, and then they put in that line about the Lord. Like it was the Lord's purpose from the beginning. And
I don't know about from the beginning.
Who wrote that? I mean, who decided to make that comment?
Okay, and you know, we talked about it. You and I did, the idea of this being God-inspired words. It doesn't say God dictated the words, but He lays it on someone's heart to tell the story. But in practical terms, in army terms, David is in a no-win position. David has to have time, because he's left without an entire army. He's left with some people. But if Ahithophel brings down 12,000 people, David loses. In human terms, in practical terms, David's in a no-win situation. And yet we see this guy show up. We see him go give the perfect words to delay, to let David get out and gather together an army. And so I guess we hit a point where we have to decide, is this God or is David just lucky? And what this tells us, this says to us that it was God's purpose to make this counsel of Ahithophel nonsense. And that's what happened. So, my inclination is, from my personal experience, I'm not that lucky. And so I think that this line, regardless of who wrote it, I think it's accurate.
And it also says to bring disaster on the son of Absolom, not David. David's the winner, of course, but not, it's noted to go to the guy the son, to destroy him.
Yes.
And they take over.
Well, I'll explain that to you, because, you can click it off. Absalom is not king. Absalom but God made David king. God had David anointed. And if you remember how important it was that Saul was God's anointed king. I mean, this is not a thing to take lightly. Absalom has taken it upon himself. And so if it says that he chose to bring disaster on Absalom, I think it's for being arrogant enough to think he's gonna take over from God's anointed king. So yeah, I'm okay with looking at it that way. You can say to help David or to bring disaster on Absalom. I suppose it's both.
So now we're going back to now what is Hushai going to do? How is he going to warn David? And you have to remember last time we met, when David decided to leave Jerusalem, the ark was coming with him, and all of a sudden David said, no, the Ark of the Covenant needs to go back to Jerusalem. And he told the priests to go back with the Ark of the Covenant. And so you have to know that they're back there. There's 2 priests back there and their sons. And so this is Hushai's plan to warn David.
Yep. So now that he's planted this advice, and all the people, the people listen to it and they go, wow, that sounds like a great plan. We're going to absolutely wipe out David and all of his people. And they're happy about the power that will bring them. Look how powerful we'll be if we wipe everybody out. Abiathar had said, I'm just going to take out David and we're going to salvage all the people. And these guys are bloodthirsty. They say, man, we will really be powerful if we kill them all. And
But
and-
at this point, they don't know, Hushai doesn't know what advice Absalom is really going to take. He just knows he needs to give David some more time.
he knows he's bought some time, and that's the point. So now we're at verse 15, 2 Samuel 17, verse 15. Hushai told Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, this is what Ahithophel has advised Absalom and the elders of Israel, and this is what I've advised. Now send quickly and tell David, do not spend the night at the fords in the wilderness, but be sure to cross over. Otherwise, the king and all the people with him will be swallowed up. So you're right. He doesn't know. Absalom may ignore his advice. And he sends word out. He says, tell David, don't get stuck at the river. And it's hard, by the way. Even if it's not you have to go to a special place to go across a river. It's hard to get a lot of people across a river. The slowest ones slow everybody down. And you can't leave have the strongest go across and leave the weakest ones behind, because if someone comes, they'll all be killed. It's a mess. And
Is this Jordan? Is this the river?
it is the Jordan. It is the Jordan, yes. And so here this advisor sends word through the priest, go tell David, don't stop at the river for the night. Get across, whatever it takes, get across, because there's a chance that Absalom listens to the other advice and they're going to ride you down. So he sends it, and it says
17.
on verse 17, now Jonathan and Ahimaaz, the sons of these priests, were staying in Rogel, where a servant girl would come and pass information along to them. They in turn would go and inform King David, for they dared not be seen entering the city. But a young man did see them and told Absalom, so the two left quickly and came to the house of a man in Bahurim. He had a well in his courtyard, and they climbed down into it. Then the man's wife took a covering and spread it over the mouth of the well, scattering grain over it so no one would know a thing. When Absalom's servants came to the woman at the house, they asked, where are Ahimaaz and Jonathan? Well, they've crossed over the brook, she replied. The men searched but did not find them, so they returned to Jerusalem. And this here again is another one of those things. And it happens in battle. It happens in real, modern day battles, things like the Battle of Midway, where one little thing could go wrong and ruin everything. And yet, it all falls together. Well, these two guys, they're having to relay information to David, because if they get caught, they're in trouble. And someone sees them, they hide in a well. And this, again, the people in the countryside are loyal to David, and they hide these two messengers. And so they go back and say, the messengers must have gotten away. After the men had gone, Ahimaaz and Jonathan climbed up out of the well and went to inform King David, saying, get up and cross over the river at once, for Ahithophel has given this advice against you. David and all the people with him got up and crossed the Jordan. By daybreak, there was no one left who had not crossed the Jordan. And this doesn't sound like a big deal. It's a big deal. Going with all those people, crossing a river at night, getting it done. It's a big deal. And that's why it's here. We just don't think much about it. We don't think in those terms. So David and all the people with him got up and crossed the Jordan. By daybreak, there was no one left who had not. I read that. When Ahithophel saw that his advice, this is ugly. When Ahithophel, the counselor, saw that his advice had not been followed, he saddled his donkey and set out for his house in his hometown. He put his affairs in order and hanged himself. So he died and was buried in his father's tomb.
So Ahithophel saw the writing on the wall. He says, my advice was good. I know it was good. I know it was the only possibility of taking down David. Now Absalom is taking Hushai's advice, and he's going to buy time. And he knows David. He knows David is a great war strategist, and he knows in all likelihood, David is going to win. And when David wins,
he's a traitor.
He's a traitor, and he's going to be killed. So he does it himself.
Yep. Then David went to Mahanaim, and Absalom crossed the Jordan with all the men of Israel. Absalom had appointed Amasa over the army of Joab, or in place of Joab. So obviously Joab's with David, he's got to have another leader. Amasa was the son of a man named Ithra, the Ishmaelite, who had married Abigail. The bottom line, he's the uncle of Absalom. Some people say cousin. I don't know how they get there. I drew the family tree.
Of Joab?
Of Joab. Yeah, he is the uncle of Joab. And he doesn't appear to have experience as a leader, but Absalom decides, I'm sure he thinks, well, he's the uncle of these wild men that have beaten everyone. I'm going to put him in charge of my troops. So the Israelites and Absalom camped in the land of Gilead. When David came to Mahanaim, he was met by Shobi, son of Nahash, from Rabbah of the Ammonites. Now, there was these characters from the past just keep showing up. In a few chapters ago, David had captured or had beaten the Ammonites, and this son of Nahash, you remember, David treated him well. When Nahash died, David sent some people over there, mourners, to console him. And that's the one where they got into a big fight because he didn't believe it.
And this is another one.
This is a brother. This is another one of Nahash's sons. And he turns out to be loyal to David. David has treated them well. Obviously, he's treated them well. David conquered them. But when the time comes, here comes this same son of or a different son of Nahash. And he comes to David's aid. He brings his own troops. And then Machir, the son of Amiel from Lodabar, the crippled boy, Jonathan's son. When Saul dies, they ship him off to this guy. Mephibosheth goes to live with Machir in Lodabar. And here this guy comes to David's rescue. He comes to his side. And this other guy named Barzillai, the Gileadite from Rogalim. They brought beds, basins, earthen vessels, as well as wheat, barley, flour, roasted grain, beans, lentils, honey, curd, sheep, cheese from the herd for David and his people to eat. For they said, the people have become hungry, exhausted, and thirsty in the wilderness. And so what's happened here? David has retreated. He's gone across the Jordan, and he's conquered that land, but he treated the people well. And we always knew it, but now we see evidence of it, because when David's in trouble, instead of saying, you came over here and beat us down, they come to his aid. They bring food, they bring wine, they bring all this stuff to give them strength back, because they know they've still got more traveling and then they've got to fight. And it's this incredible story again of David and who he's been, that he inspires this kind of loyalty.
And I always think when we're reading it like this, how many times we miss this? Because if you don't know, if you're just reading it like one chapter at a time and not doing the whole story, you miss the fact that this was chapters and chapters ago and decades ago that David helped some of these people. And now they're saying they've come back to help him. But we would have missed that if you didn't know that part of the story.
But, more than just help them, he conquered them.
Right, that's true.
He conquered them, and yet they find their way to be loyal, because he was obviously a very good ruler. He obviously took care of the people, even out in the, way out in the far away places, enough that now David is at their mercy, and they come to help.
Is there more than just family and good politics of a conquering hero? Is there a religious connection here where everybody is Israel? And so I know that David has been appointed, and so I'm staying with him even though he's under attack.
Okay, is there a real, and there's some of that. Machir, the guy from Lodabar, is an Israelite. The other one we're told is a Gileadite. He's from Gilead. But here's another one thing. I'm glad you brought it up because I had meant to mention it today. What we see through this story is a whole bunch of people who are not Jews, but who have lived in Israel at peace and been treated well enough. So we don't know about Barzillai. I'm not certain. There is a religious connection with some of them, but some of them are these foreigners. There are these Gerim who are able to live in the same country with the Jews, live at peace. They're not converted. We don't see any evidence of that. And it's a good point to this story, Gene. I'm glad you brought it up. It's not like we're led to believe that they were insular, that they were only nice to their own kind. All these people live together, yeah, and they all fight together and have loyalty to each other. So there's a human element. There's the religion, but there's also the idea of kindness, of showing hesed. These people come back and remain loyal.
So now we're at 2 Samuel 18, and now the troops are finally going to meet each other.
David reviewed his troops and appointed over them commanders of hundreds and of thousands. He sent out the troops, a third under Joab, a third under Joab's brother Abishai, who we just heard about. He was the one that was going to cut someone's head off, and a third under Ittai the Gittite. And he's the one at the entrance, at the gate, that David told, don't put yourself out on a limb for me. And he's the one that said, I'm going with you even unto death. It's just a neat story. I just love that these people, come back in, and you see the value of it now. And the king said to his troops, I will surely march out with you as well. But the people pleaded, you must not go out, for if we have to flee, they will pay no attention to us. Even if half of us die, they will not care. But you're worth 10,000 of us. It's better for you now if you support us for the city. And David said, I will do whatever seems best to you, the king replied. So he stood beside the gate while all the troops marched out by hundreds and by thousands. You want to comment on that?
No, I want to get to the next.
All right.
section.
Now the king had commanded Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, treat the young man Absolom gently for my sake. And all the people heard the king's orders to each of the commanders regarding Absolom. So David's army marched out into the field to engage Israel in battle, which took place in the forest of Ephraim. There the people of Israel were defeated by David's servants, and the slaughter was great that day, 20,000 men. The battle spread over the whole countryside, and that day the forest devoured more people than the sword. I think we should mention a couple of things right here.
Yeah.
First of all, David's going to ride out, into the battle, and they say, yeah, no. And remember Ahithophel's counsel, if I kill David, it's over. And they said, yeah, no, you're going to cause us more trouble than you're going to do good. You need to stay here. You're worth 10,000 of us. And they ride out.
And David says, you're right. And he doesn't say, I'm arrogant and it's only me. He says
Once
okay.
again is David's humility. He hears the counsel of these other people, his military leaders, and he says, good, I'll listen to you. Not all kings will listen to people like that. Whatever seems best to you, he said. So on the way out of town, he tells these military leaders, be gentle with the young man Absalom, with his son. This is a terrible thing in battle to say, don't do anything to harm Absalom. Now they've got to fight with gloves on. And that's a very difficult position to be in.
And they made sure to say, and all the people heard.
Yep. So David's army marched into the field to engage Israel in battle. Oh, the forest. And it says that that day the forest devoured more men than the sword. We think of forest, and I find it in all the old paintings and drawings, these big giant trees. This is probably more like what we would think of as a thicket. And what happens is that these, it's like the scrub oaks. You go out in the countryside here and you see those scrub oak thickets, and getting through them is difficult. And there are places where there are openings, and beyond there's a clearing. And if you're on the defense, if you've had a chance to set up, they've got to come through that little opening. And it doesn't mean that the forest devoured them like the trees killed the people. It just means that this terrain allowed David's people to pick the place of the battle and to funnel people to the places of their choosing. And they just wiped out these other people. I mean, they had home court advantage.
And we're at
Time.
which is a good place to stop. We'll find out what happens to Absolom next week.
If this is it reads like a novel. If it's tedious, what's that? Cliffhanger. I hope it's not too tedious. I mean, I realize that it might be, but it's a story. Yeah, it's a story about people in this case, and some of the stuff. What I hope to get out of this, I hope to bring to you. If you read this casually, there's some things that seem far-fetched. But actually, if you understand what they're really talking about, it turns out, no, it makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, it's very, very, not just believable, but I said, well, yeah, no, of course, I see that happening. So,
And we can't forget that David continued to pray. God answered his prayer sort of unexpectedly and just miraculously with Hushai's counsel being able to go against Ahithophel's counsel. And also, I think this week showed a really good compare and contrast between Absalom and David. They are different. At first, you could read it and it looks like they're all men of war, but they're different.
Absalom wants power. David wants what's best for the country and for the people, and it comes through. It's so clear in the approach that the two take. And I do. Yeah, Mary is exactly right. Remember that part. David asked for help from God, and so often, what happens is we get in that situation, and after it turns out in our favor, we go, wow, I got lucky there, didn't I? And we forget. And what we're being told here is this is absolutely God's hand taking care of David.
And before you pray, and if you reread Psalm 3, it just makes so much sense when he is sitting there waiting for, knowing that Absalom has more troops than he did, and they're going to attack him. And Is he going to be okay? Sorry.
We'll close with a prayer. God, we're thankful that you do hear our prayers. We're tested just like David at times. We find ourselves in what feels like no-win situations. And regardless of the outcome, we cling to you. We hopefully remember. Sometimes we forget, but we come to you. And it's that presence. It is that closeness to you that gets us through, even if the outcome isn't exactly the way we want it to be. We find ourselves moved closer to your presence, and we know that's the thing that you seek for us. Be with us this week. This is a lesson that we need. We're tested. These times test us. Remind us to come to you. Remind us to be drawn closer to you and to accept help when we find it. And when we find help, when you send other people to us, sometimes in our arrogance, God, we just refuse to accept it. Maybe the story, bring it back to us that when you send people to us, that we're able to humble ourselves and accept that help that you provide. Be with us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. You guys can unmute yourself. We're getting our sound system better, you guys. We're going to get this.
Woohoo! Oh, yay. It really does help, Mary and Scott, for you to say right where we are, because these names are so complicated and it's so confusing.
I agree.
And so when I follow along in the Bible, just word for word, it helps me understand so much better. Thank you very much.
You gave
Me
good
too.
counsel,
Thank you.
and I humbled myself and listened to you.
You guys all have a good week, okay?
Thank you.
Oh, you
Everybody
too.
have a
Thank
great
you.
week. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Mary and Scott.
Do the
Bye.
recording, right?
Hi, Jean. Bye, Jean.
You can leave that
Bye,
on.
Jack.